Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talkin Toons with Toys. This is the podcast where we talk about cartoons that are not very mainstream, cartoons that are considered niche or obscure, and cartoons that you probably may not have heard of. I am Barney the Dinosaur, your host. If you can't tell from the voice, I am in fact Barney the Dinosaur from the iconic 90s show, Barney and Friends. Although I've been redesigned and because I also star in the popular YouTube channel called The M, where I star in a show called Adventures of the Trio. So I'm a cartoon as well, and in that show I've been redesigned along with a few other famous cartoon faces, a la Toy Story. Right. So in that show I am a plush dinosaur, and I am also joined by two cohorts. A name that you probably know and faces that you will most likely know. Their names are SpongeBob SquarePants and SpongeBalloon SquarePants. Hi everybody, I'm SpongeBalloon SquarePants. I also star in Adventures of the Trio. And on that show, I am designed as a giant flattened balloon. I know I said you probably already know the face and know the name, but could you mind letting people know who exactly you are in real life? Oh yeah, sorry. I am SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm from the Nickelodeon show SpongeBob SquarePants, and on Adventures of the Trio, I am called SpongeBalloon SquarePants. And I am SpongeBob SquarePants. I am also named SpongeBob SquarePants, but I'm also in the show How Adventures of the Trio, where my name is SpongeBob SquarePants because I am uh, a papercraft bobblehead creature type thing. How do I define it? How to define one and my design in the show? Bobblekin. We call it a bobblekin because you're shaped like a bobblehead, but you're considered, a cartoon as well. Or just classify you as a moron. I also like that term. Hey, what's the saltiness? What happened to yes, you're born of the dinosaur? What's all that, tender friendliness and all that? It's called maturity, my friends. It's called maturity, boys. As that show was past its prime. I've moved on from it. It's called maturity, and I am now a mature character. Sure, mature. Hey, does anyone know the movie Ted with Seth MacFarlane? First of all, Seth MacFarlane is one of the most iconic and revered animators on the planet, so I will take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. And that actually is a great segue into the premise of the podcast. So, as I mentioned up top, this is a podcast where we talk about niche cartoons and animation, things that you would consider not very, mainstream. Hmm. Because everyone's heard of the iconic cartoons, ones like Tom and Jerry or Looney Tunes, or we're talking Seth MacFarlane, and then Family Guy and all that, So yeah, those are more mainstream cartoons, but this space is enormous. So there's plenty of cartoons and animation out there, shows, movies, whatever, that you probably aren't even aware of, and that is why we come on the spot to talk about it. Now you might be thinking to yourself, "Oh, cartoons are for kids. Who would be interested in that? Interested in hearing a podcast about that? That when they're for kids or just little babies?" Well, I will have you know, hater, I know you're out there. Huh? Cartoons can resonate with anybody, anyone, any gender, any race, boy, girl, male, adult, whatever. However, cartoons can resonate with anybody in any area. Huh. And we have guests to come has to come here to talk about it, which brings us to our first guest. As our first guest on this podcast, I will make it official, despite the fact that I am stumbling my words every time. I mean, I don't think I can stumble anything when I introduce this guest, because this guest right here is a man. And you want to say cartoons are for kids? And well, our first guest is a man. We are all boys. This dude is a man, and he is a YouTuber. a bodybuilder, a fitness, a personal trainer. You can find his podcast on his YouTube, to Darius Carlisle Official, where he is known in the YouTube space as a weeb hunk. That's right, he's a hunk of a man, and he loves cartoons. Ladies and gentlemen, our first guest on the podcast, our guest, Mr. Darius Carlisle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you. That intro was on fire. Loved it. And I'm honored to be your first guest on this podcast.
Oh, the honor is all ours. I mean, to have someone of your caliber, your, I'll say, hunkiness, uh, as our first guest on a podcast where we talk about cartoons, it's truly an honor. Truly an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, we're here to talk about what we love, right? And what we grew up on. Because let's face it, who didn't watch a cartoon growing up?
Amen to that, brother. Amen. And that actually brings us to the first question I have. Before we get into it, and so before we bring the show, before we start talking about the show that you chose for this episode, so I just want to know, what is your interest in cartoons? Did you grow up on them as a child, and what was the sort of like the general interest or like genres of cartoons that you grew up with or enjoy to this day?
So I mainly grew up like with my mom, and she didn't have cable, but we were able back then to watch like WB, like kids, Fox Kids cartoons. So that was like a lot of the superhero stuff, like X-Men, Superman, and Batman, and Animaniacs, which I love, and Tiny Toons.
Oh
And then,
yeah.
oh yeah, and then when I would stay with my dad, he had cable, so I was able to watch like Disney Channel stuff, Nickelodeon '90s cartoons. Like I
Buddy.
loved. Oh yeah, there you go, representation. So I loved, Rocket Power was one of my favorites because of the kids doing action sports. Angry Beavers, Aria Monsters. I loved watching those growing up.
Ah, my brethren, my humble brethren in the 90s, I love it. First of all, you guys were created in the late 90s. We're talking about classic 90s, so control yourselves, control yourselves. Do not be a actor for my show, brethren. Brethren, this is my channel. I'm on Nickelodeon, and you are talking about my brothers right there. Uh, Okay. Well, anyway, I love that. I love how you say. I love how you, grew up on all that. The '90s and all that. And that was like a pivotal moment for a lot of animation back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that really birthed a lot of the famous cartoons that we know now, and especially some of the more obscure cartoons as well, which actually brings us to the show and topic for this episode, because not only have you chosen a show with a name that we know very well, and probably a lot of people in this space know very well, but along with that, you've also chosen a show that fits into the demographic. I'll go on and say the interest. No, the tradition, the American cultural touchstone for a generation of children, in my opinion. And we are talking about Sonic SatAM, a.k.a. Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon.
Yes, let's go. Love that growing up.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. First of all, I'm very glad that we're kicking off this podcast talking about this, because we know because Sonic has definitely has a big resonance in these past few years. Yeah, so I'm very glad we're talking about it. But I'm very glad that we are talking about just Saturday morning cartoons in general. I don't know, because if anything people can relate to, just being in that space on Saturday morning on PJs. It is breakfast. As just watching some of the classic Saturday morning cartoons. That's what and that's in the name. And yeah, it's iconic. It's iconic at this point. Now, I'll go and so far and say it was a tradition for many years.
Mm-hmm. You always had to wake up super early, get that bowl of cereal ready, run downstairs, make sure you had the TV on the right channels.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Uh, and your parents, and you didn't have school, so so your parents were concerned about it. So yeah, it was a beautiful time, a beautiful time. Oh, I love it so much. And as a '90s person myself, I can very much relate to that whole world. Yeah, so I love this choice. This choice, I love it. I love it. So before we really get into it, I think it's probably fair that we provide just a brief synopsis of what the show is, because I'm sure anybody knows about Sonic the Hedgehog and all that. But just for the people that don't know about this show in particular, all right, I think it's best we start as we start out giving a brief synopsis of what the show is. So SpongeBob will give us a brief synopsis as of what Sonic SatAM is. Take it away, Bobble Boy. Thank you, Barney. So obviously, Sonic the Hedgehog has had a resurgence in these past few years. You know, with live action CGI and CGI theatrical blockbusters, very popular games, games and video games, and even in streaming like new fresh media in the realm of streaming, and but I don't think people know. I think people know that I know that Sonic, at least in media, goes way back in the days, is to the '90s, well specifically the '90s, and that is where we have this show, Sonic SatAM. So Sonic SatAM, also known as Sonic the Hedgehog, but was referred to because of its Saturday morning time slot. Uh, Sonic AM is a show that was created in the '90s, and is that followed a previous predecessor, also known as The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. But in this iteration, how Sonic is depicted as a member of a band known a group of anthropomorphic animals known as the Freedom Fighters, who are battling to overthrow the evil dictator Dr. Robotnik, who has turned their home planet of Mobius into a polluted industrial dystopia. Utopia, controlled by what Robotnik calls as roboticized creatures. This show has what made this show different from the previous Sonic the Hedgehog show is it was credited for its more dramatic and dark storytelling, which set it apart from its more lighthearted and gag-ridden adventure series. Hmm. The show ran for two seasons from 1993 to 1994, until it was canceled. And so that being said, despite its cancellation, it has still been regarded as a cult hit, and and has had a pretty decent following ever since. So that is Sonic the Hedgehog Sat AM. Back to you, Barney. After all, it's juicing time. You realize that just sounds so weird when it's taken out of context. You realize that, right? I had an opening and I took it. And yeah. For context for the people listening at home, juice and time was a classic catchphrase that Sonic said in this show. Um, and I'll be honest, it sounds a lot better. Sounds a lot better when he says it, and does not sound that great when you say it. Darius, yes, back me up here.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Like Sonic, you can't beat the way he said it. That's his phrase. Let him say it.
Thank you. See, I am very glad you are on this pod. Hmm. So anyway, hey, yeah. So that is Sonic Sat AM. Will say we actually were aware of this show, before you chose this. So we were actually aware of this show. What I didn't realize, I was a little shocked by this, is that it only ran for two seasons and it's like 26 episodes. So it's because we saw this on like streaming, hey man, so we thought it was a show that went on for like a while. So when you
Mhm.
pitched this, I was actually surprised as there was only 2 seasons and only like 13 episodes a season.
Exactly. Like it felt way longer when it was on TV.
Yeah. I'm really excited to talk about this. About this. Before we really start diving in, I just really want to know, uh, why why did you choose this to be the topic of this episode? Like, why is this show considered your guilty pleasure?
Because mainly like I like the fact that this was a darker, different, more dramatic theme for Sonic because we all remember the original Sonic the Adventure like show. That was it's fun. It's like the typical Saturday morning cartoon like Sonic says at the end like giving like life moral lessons and all that. The show's like only 30 minutes and everything goes back to normal. But Sonic SatAM, it's like, hey, this is a continuing storyline and it had real stakes and real drama. And it brought up a side that, like, maybe as a kid you didn't think about it, but as I got older and would rewatch it, I'm like, huh, like, it makes you think like from different perspectives and what goes on during war and how certain things affect you and other people around you. And even how sometimes we all have to make difficult decisions for the good of, maybe for the good of the cause or whatever. So things like that.
Oh yeah, the darker undertones are really I was a little shocked by well, obviously Sonic the Hedgehog, throughout history has been involved in like pretty dark storylines, but the fact that this show blends so well the comedy of it, and also implementing that sort of like darker undertone of like war and like trying to find hope when things are like really bleak, like, and all that.
Hmm.
It really shows the versatility of what animations can be. Hey, ca- hey, it can be, very light and goofy, but it can also be like, oh, this is actually really provoking. Okay, like really thought provoking. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Like it definitely gave you kind of like, well, one of my episodes that I can definitely give a reference to. It's called Warp Sonic, and in the episode they meet another group of freedom fighters, and one of the reasons why that always stuck out to me was, oh, they're freedom fighters just like Sonic and his friends. They're gonna be on the same team. They kind of were, but then the leader was looking out like, hey, I'm looking out for my people, not you guys, and double crosses them, steals their power source. But now because Robotnik's like goons and like his robots have caught on to them, both sides are in danger and have to work together now to actually free both like camps from Robotnik's grip. And it's like, that's a real life situation because stuff like that can happen in real life where, people want to be selfish and look out for themselves, but then lo and behold, that selfish decision end up ruining you. So now you have to find, hopefully somebody can come along and save you, but sometimes it doesn't always work.
And that is one of the biggest things. I mean, like, yeah, not even just the things, but like the characters themselves were like so complex, and so like flushed out. One of the things that we were talking about off air, was that the characters were so much more memorable, that, unlike the predecessor, the Adventure series. Because, like,
Mhm.
honestly, you have Sonic, like, you have Tails, you have Robotnik, of course, those are the big one, those are the big ones. But like this show, really had some like really like memorable characters, like really like powerful characters that were not goofy. Well, at least most of them. They're like really fleshed out, really three dimensional, and really had like big stakes in this show.
Mhm. Like you
But
actually you actually cared about their arc and what was going to happen to them.
absolutely. Hey, and another thing that I really like, thing that I really liked about this that I actually didn't realize until I really dived into it. I dived into it was that Jaylee White was the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, and of
Yes,
course,
sir.
yeah. And I mean, of course, people might know him as Steve Urkel from Family Matters, but the fact that Jillian White played Sonic in this and and what honestly actually shocked me as well, is that he played Sonic for a long time.
Hmm.
And
For years, he played Sonic, even in the video games.
yeah, for like 11 years, he was like the Sonic, Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was surprising. As in, at least when I first saw it, uh, and you could, and even when he was voicing Sonic in this show, like you couldn't tell that it was Jaylee White because it was portrayed so well. Oh well, like the character of Sonic the Hedgehog, which is portrayed so well in the show, and all the other things they was doing when he was voicing the characters. So yeah, I really love that.
Oh yeah, especially like who would have thought Steve Urkel, like the nerdiest kid on TV back then, was gonna play one of the coolest characters of that, that of that time. Like, and it's so iconic too. Not only that, but shout out to a brother playing, Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, you know, how many of us were getting shots like that back then?
Exactly. And for people that are only listening, Darius is talking, as a fellow black man, talking about Jaylee White, who was White, who was also a black man. And one of the things that I found interesting, because I was looking into this, one of the approaches that White took when he was voicing Sonic the Hedgehog, which I thought was so cool. Um, is that his approach to voicing Sonic the Hedgehog was he tried to make it so Sonic was not associated with the race, which
Yeah.
I loved.
Hmm. And you need that because, well, especially back then, because I mean, I don't think like back then, if it was like public knowledge that Jaleel was playing him, I don't think Sonic probably would have gotten over as much. But you can tell in his voice, like it didn't really belong to like a black guy or a white guy, like you said. Like it just sounded cool, and everybody liked it.
Exactly, and that is exactly what he said. What he said. I mean, you could look through a commentary he did for the package. That was his approach. Not to, she didn't want to sound like black or anything. He just wanted, and this was his official quote. He wanted to sound fast.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and he
I
did. He definitely did. Like,
absolutely. And you can always tell when a character puts care into the characters that they voice. That's why he voiced Sonic for so long.
mm,
And that's why other people are carrying the torch as well. I mean, like Ben Schwartz in the live action CGI Sonic was great. Roger Craig Smith in the video games is amazing.
oh yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's because you can tell that they really care for Sonic the Hedgehog. That's why all three of them, had them been voicing it for so long.
And see, like that's something like we all need to take into account. Like if somebody's putting forth that effort into bringing that character to life, we can all appreciate that, and it's gonna stick with us for probably the rest of our lives. It's gonna be that iconic for us.
As for someone that for a cartoon that has been voiced by a very prolific voice actor, I can very much attest to that. This is not about you. This is not about you, SquarePants. So shut it.
For real, we've been talking about SquarePants for like what 20 years now, and this his show's still going. He can take a seat.
Uh, you are a guest, so I will not take that offensively. Thank you. Thank you for the comments. I love this. I love this.
I got your
Oh,
back, buddy. I'm on your team.
thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So obviously, there's a lot of things to love about this show. But now, of course, as we said, this podcast is about obscure cartoons. So there's definitely some reasons why this show may not have been as mainstream as most. So what? So in your opinion, what do you think were the issues, or some of the lower quality parts that may have made this show, not as popular as it should have been? Because obviously there's a lot of reasons to love about the show, but what are some reasons that you think people didn't really vibe with this show as much as they should have?
Well, I'm gonna go with the number one reason is money, because one of the reasons why season three never got produced was I think the studio was bought out by ABC, and ABC was like, nah, we're gonna stick with our version of Sonic, which was the original Sonic Adventures, and then they wanted to do their own Sonic Underground, which came later, which wasn't a bad show, but it's like, you could just gave us a season three because Sonic, you know, SatAM just left off on a huge cliffhanger, and it's like, it kind of like, yeah, Robotnik lost, but it wasn't truly over, and we never got a conclusion to that. And another thing that I want to say bothered me personally, like I kind of get it from an executive point, but it's like, it's basically you stick with what brought you to the dance. You don't try to be like anybody else. In the second season, first of all, they put the finale in the middle of the season. So the production, it gives you the ending, and then there's a bunch of random, like, kind of like Sonic Says episodes, like after school special vibes. And it's like, that's not what you guys are about. You guys were about this dystopian future timeline, Game of Thrones style, Robotnik taking over and they're trying to get control back. And now here you are in the second season, like the second half of it, trying to be like Sonic, the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, your predecessor. And that just doesn't fit. You guys stick with what brought you and what your identity is. So I think them trying to get away from that also hurt them a lot. And the fact that it's like, okay, Antoine, I thought he was a
Mm.
good comedy character, but I know a lot of French people were offended by him because, like, oh, he's the French coward. But I feel like that could have been rectified if we actually got the season three, because in the comics, Antoine becomes an actual, like, he's a good knight. Him and Bunny Rabbit have a thing, and it would have been nice to see their romance blossom and him becoming, like, showing true courage and, progressing as a character. And another issue that I feel like this comes from the studio thinking that it was too dark for kids. I digress because I mean, hey, growing up as a kid, I mean, how many times did we watch like Batman Adventures or G.I. Joe, things like that that were considered, dark or violent? What was the difference here?
I mean, the Batman. I mean, you want to talk about dark animation? I mean, the Batman animated series. How about that?
Exactly. Like I saw Joker do stuff to Harley Quinn and other people. I'm like, wait a minute, like, how is this allowed?
Yeah. The dark undertones. I mean, you can understand why they had to do that because it was a thing for kids, and I'll actually add down to what you said because you said that ABC bought it. It's actually I bought it. Actually, Disney was the one that bought ABC, and they decided to cancel
Yeah, freaking mouse.
it. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, I can understand why that is, and also because again, it was the '90s. We had shows like Power Rangers that became a thing, and other stuff like that. So
Gargoyle was another one that was dark,
oh yeah,
but
gargoyles.
and
Yeah,
that was Disney too. It's like, what, you know, I don't get it. Like, and then eventually they started pimping out Sonic anyway. So it's like, why didn't y'all just keep him for yourself?
yeah. Gargoyles was a big one. a big one. Part of me wishes we could talk about that on the podcast, but I guess, but that might be a little too popular because I could still, because even though that also had a short run, there's still a lot of people that are fandom about that one. So, that one.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
who knows when the who knows? We're still early in the podcast. You never know.
I mean,
But
I
yeah,
got some other suggestions for you from like, well, it's like ABC One Saturday Morning. Like, I don't think too many people remember, but we'll talk about those like another time.
yeah. And the Antoine thing, and that I can understand, and because yeah, I mean like every cartoon needs like the comic relief and all that, and
Yeah.
all that. Although Antoine was definitely a character that I could live without in a show like this. And granted, the French stereotype that has been a thing in like cartoons for a long time now. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if Pepe Le Pew may have started that or that. I don't know. But yeah, that's been a thing and for a while now. We actually have an article about that. We actually have an article. Remember that, bud? Oh yeah. So in the research we looked into the idea of the French stereotype, why that's such a big thing in America, and we found this little thing, then that and that I'm just gonna read from this article we found, and so according to this, since the start of the Iraqi War, Americans have been especially critical of the French, and the war in Iraq is a battle against terrorism. As them stereotypes, the French culture resurface virtually in America because the French refused to help to aid the United States in the war of Iraq. After that, Americans proclaimed the French as arrogant, cold, disrespectful, temperamental, or reluctant to change, blah blah blah, and no longer did Americans want to use items associated with the French, and therefore, this this is the one. This is the quote we wrote. I mean the quote that we saw, and this makes us laugh every time. Every time this is a true thing that happened. A thing that happened because America America did not want to be associated with the French, and apparently U.S. lawmakers had French fries renamed to freedom fries, and
Oh
French
yeah,
toast renamed freedom
I
toast.
remember that. I remember that. They made us say that like in school we could not call them French fries. It had to be freedom fries. Like, that was wild.
Oh my god! Oh, that makes me laugh every time. The French stereotype I guess has been a thing for a while now, and but yeah, even so, it was kind of a cheap gag to put in, which didn't which it didn't really fly too much. So yeah, I understand that part.
Yeah, it's just funny to show how petty we can be as Americans, you know?
Yeah. All right, those were the cons. But now let's get to the pros. So what do you think are the good parts of what makes this show work?
Well, number one, I'm gonna go with the storyline because
Oh yeah.
it's very rare when we get a good dystopian storyline and that it can also not just encompass like sci-fi, but also great magic and like I want to say like Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings type stuff. And this
Mm-hmm.
show did that perfectly because there was an episode where it's like the magic scrolls, and you're like, wait a minute, now we're talking about like magic scrolls,
Yep.
and then Robotnik is reaching into like mysticism and whatnot, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense because mixing science and mysticism, you would be unstoppable, but also, the great quote, "What is magic but science we don't understand yet?"
Yep.
Hashtag Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And then another great thing that we kind of touched on was the character development, because
Mm-hmm.
when you watch the original Sonic Adventures, Robotnik is like the typical cheesy, comedy goof villain. It's like, I want to take over the world. It's like, he's not going to do it because something goofy is going to happen or whatever. In this one, he was taking names, he conquered, he was taking people out like left and right, and he was a dominant person. Like, I mean, I dare to say, like, he was kind of like Thanos in this universe. Like, he was just taking everything. And Sonic, yeah, he comes off kind of like as a cocky teenager,
Mm-hmm.
but he grows and you see him mature and he's like, wait a minute, I got to think about this person. I got to think about the team. I got to think about what's going to happen if I do this. So he showed growth and development like that. Sally, she was a badass in her own right. Her and Bunny Rabbit, like they were two badass female characters, and even for that time, that was very rare to see because outside of like what Xena, Warrior Princess, and Power
Mm-hmm.
Rangers, like women weren't featured like that. They weren't seen as like badass. Like I can take care of myself or I can beat people up and take names. So seeing them like that, and then also Sally being like she's showing like true emotions with like the loss of like her father, and there's an episode where they go back in time and she meets her father,
Mm-hmm.
and Sonic can empathize because he lost Uncle Chuck, but Uncle Chuck is roboticized. They can reverse the procedure at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and he still has a bit of his humanity left, but Sally's dad is gone, and her going back in time and seeing him and how distraught she is, and it's just like she wants to bring him to the future, but that would wreck time and all that, and how like that tearful goodbye because she's like she knows what's gonna happen when Robotnik takes over, and it's just that was such a like compelling thing to see from a cartoon, especially from a 90s cartoon that barely had a good budget.
Yeah.
And it's just like that was great. And another great thing that we can touch on is, I mean, obviously, like we said, Jaleel White as Sonic was amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and props to him for just being Sonic and giving life to this character for so long. And I also love that they dealt with real world problems because that couldn't be solved in just maybe 30 minutes or whatever. Because sometimes the arcs went on for like two stories, or maybe they just kept
Yeah.
going on later. You would see it pop up later on the show. And that's good. That's good storytelling. That's good arcs. You don't always get that in the other Sonic shows because they're just made for like, okay, this is like kids after school, what they
Mm-hmm.
learn, boom, next episode.
Yeah, I mean, piggyback into the characters like, yeah, you're right. They were so flushed out, and they had arcs, that sometimes lasted throughout like a season or something like that. Especially the Uncle Chuck thing, which we'll talk about in
Hmm.
a little bit. But like all the characters were like so like again like so fleshed out. I was trying to mean Robotnik. Because yeah, let's be frank. Like I know there might be times he might have threats, or he might do something that's like oh that's a problem and all that. But let's face it, yeah, he's a comic villain. Let's just be
Exactly.
frank.
You wouldn't take them seriously.
Exactly, and that's been a throw line. That's been a throw line throughout the entire history of Sonic. Sonic, even in like in the movies, the games, and all that, he's a comic villain. In
Exactly.
this show, oh, you could really see like, oh no, this guy is not only like a brilliant military strategist, just and a cunning villain, which we
Hmm.
did not get a lot of that in the 90s.
Exactly.
But he's also like a serious threat. That's right. Like not only like successfully won a lot of the time, but he knew like what the freedom fighters were going to do in most cases. Like I was like he
Hmm.
strategized, he theorized, he planned for so much. Or it's like he was on top of his game, and to have a villain uh, that is both cunning, cunning and a smart strategist like that, and that is terrifying to think about.
Correct. Because you're like, well, how are they going to beat him if he's always like one or two steps ahead?
Exactly. Eh, exactly. And yeah, Sonic. Yeah, Jalen White as Sonic. Again, we touched on it. Touching it really brought this on. Really brought Sonic. I just want to give a quick shout out to Tails in this show as well.
Yes. Like, honestly, he, I like the development for Tails as well because he started off kind of like the kid that they wouldn't let do anything, but then all of a sudden he proves his worth, and now he's like a genuine member of the team actually helping. And I love that he wasn't always attached to Sonic like he was in the first cartoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, yeah, we know Sonic and Tails. I mean, yeah, he's technically the sidekick, but his role has developed so much more in this series to the point where he's literally a genius and he makes things like just out of nowhere sometimes. And
Exactly.
this was I felt like Sonic, SatAM was like a good like precursor to that because it showed him working with Sally and understanding how to build things and whatnot. And it's like, you know what? I like that. You gotta appreciate that. They just didn't keep him like a one note sidekick.
Exactly, exactly. And Sally Acorn, I mean, my God, we could have an entire episode of Sally Acorn because, like, again, we knew the show a while ago. We knew that Sally was like really cool, but, like really
Hmm.
diving into the show. We didn't know that she is like a genuine force to be reckoned with. Like, I am not kidding. I'm kidding. We tried to do research on Sally Acorn for this, and it was so much. There's like she's so ingrained and in the Sonic
Exactly.
universe. It's such a shame that we don't see that much of her anymore.
For real. And it's like, okay, I know like Amy's supposed to be like the girlfriend, but I'm like, look, I'm Team Sally. Like, I'm sorry, but Amy's like they might as well just treat her like little sister status because Sally just nah, that's a true queen right there. Like, oh, love her.
Exactly. And again, no shade to Amy. Hey to Amy, I love her. I love her. I love Amy Rose. Hey Rose, but like, this is something we can talk. We actually discuss in a little bit because you do kind of touch on this a little bit, touch on what I wanted to discuss and discuss with that whole trilogy in a little bit. Hey, but yeah, like, moving forward. So like again, a lot of things we love about the show. Uh, but like, what do you think? What's a sell? Like if you were to approach someone who has never heard of this show, what is the episode or scene that you would point them to try to convince them that this is a worthwhile show?
I would say my number one episode is Ultrasonic
Mm,
because that's the one where Sonic meets Uncle Chuck. He finds out he's still alive. He's just roboticized. And then he finds out that Uncle Chuck can break his like Robotnik's control, which is great because we find out, hey, there's some hope right there that Robotnik can't fully take over someone if, Uncle Chuck or maybe some other people are able to break out of that spell. And it's very good, but it gives you like kind of like Avengers Infinity War vibes, I want to
mm-hmm,
say, because you're like, oh, the good guys are so close to winning, and then Robotnik's like, he's like, oh, Uncle Chuck, you're trying to break free from my control? Yeah, that's not happening. He just cranks it up and he takes back control of him, and then he forces Uncle Chuck to try to kill Sonic.
mm-hmm,
And that's a very like deep thing because Sonic is like, Uncle Chuck, why? It's me. And he's not listening, he's not having it. So Sonic has to kind of like, not take him out completely, but he incapacitates him. And he's like,
mm-hmm.
I'll free you one day, Uncle Chuck. And that's how the episode ends, like on that somber note.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, you want to talk Uncle Chuck, which I mean, much like Sally Acorn, this whole episode could be dedicated to Uncle Chuck because that storyline that was probably one of the most grounded things about this show. Even in the pilot, they brought the even in just the first episode they mentioned the Uncle Chuck thing. It was and it's so heartbreaking. It's
Hmm.
so heartbreaking and like, and it really like humanizes Sonic in a way, because it gives him like real stakes in this fight, which is not something that we see in like later Sonic iterations. at least not to this extent, and because Sonic is a good guy. He's trying to fight. He's trying to fight. Save the world, save his friends, and all. That's cool. Uh, like having an actual family member that's affected by this war, that is like traumatizing, and especially if you go into the episode onto the other episode that you recommended, Blast of the Past, as the two-parter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
just watching him at 5 years old, seeing Uncle Chuck roboticize. So it's like that
Hmm.
scene, and, like I don't care if you're a kid, a teen, adult, or whatever. You watch that scene, and it is heartbreaking.
Exactly.
Heartbreaking to
Because
see
that
it.
was all he had. Like that's all he had for family. And then like right there in front of him, like he's basically getting sacrificed to be roboticized so Sonic can live. And Sonic can't do anything about it.
Exactly, and like I said, it really humanizes Sonic in this
Mhm.
show, including the show that you mentioned, Sonic on the Ground, because it also shows Chuck, and that whole relationship with him and Sonic. And I will say, the one thing that pisses me off about Sega, I mean, there's a couple of things, but I'd say my biggest pet peeve that Sega did is that after this show on the ground and all that, and this is a true fact, by the way, they like wiped away the whole Uncle Chuck storyline
Yeah.
because yeah, they like completely like wiped away any familiar ties with Sonic at all. That's why you never see anything about Sonic's family, Sonic's parents. And of course, you see like guardians or and like people that like protectors of him, but like you never see like actual like blood relatives or people that like of his kind, and that's because Sega like wiped away clean any like family connections to Sonic. So the whole Uncle Chuck storyline was wiped away from the Sonic universe.
And that's such just like disrespect to like the community and the fan base because it's like we all know who Uncle Chuck is. We all appreciate him. Like he's even in the comic book for God's sake, like honor him, put him in the shows and in the movies because you just having random guardians just brings up more questions cuz like okay, well,
Mhm.
where does he come from? Who is his family?
Exactly. So yeah, that's why the Uncle Chuck then is just such a potent thing in this show.
Mhm. Because that's something we all can relate to. Like as a kid, like imagine like seeing like your parents or whoever was taking care of you just gone. They have to go. Like,
Hmm.
they get captured or, worse, like, they get like, murdered or whatever. That is to that level. That is that feeling because you can
And
be.
it's a real thing. It's a real thing in war times.
And a lot of people don't think about that. It's like it's not always going to be happy go lucky during like war times, which is what they were dealing with. Like that was a military coup that we witnessed.
Exactly. And yeah, like really shows that like people are not only trapped in that thing, but also like sometimes can resort to really like low levels, like you brought up Warp Sonic, which is another episode that you recommended, and maybe that's
Hmm.
another thing. And so yeah, stuff like this truly happens, and the fact that a show captured that so well is incredible.
Exactly. And then another good sell that I personally I should have included also in the pros, but I'm gonna say it here. That intro, that opening theme song, like you cannot
Oh
tell me that
yes,
is not a bop. Like I would love playing that. Like when I would go to the gym or when I'm doing cardio, I used to have a whole Sonic like music playlist that was always on it.
I was truly hoping we were gonna get to that intro, intro because the three of us have listened to that intro so many times. It is an absolute bop, 100%.
Yes, it is a true banger right there. Honestly,
Oh
I
yeah.
would say that's like one of my favorite. That's like the favorite intro for me.
Oh,
Another close one is like
100%.
Sonic X.
Oh yeah, Sonic X, yeah, definitely. Hey, can I just bounce in and say, hey, again, and I know you said late 90s, right, 90s, but the one thing that I can appreciate about Saturday morning cartoons and cartoons is that era or the theme songs. As you know, Sonic SatAM, Sonic SatAM, and like that theme song. It's one of the things that I don't like about streaming now, and they allow you to skip the intros. We personally don't like that. I like that because it's songs like that that really immerse you into the story.
Yeah, correct. It's a part of the show, and you wanna. It fully immerses you, and it's like it gives you more like of what's at stake. And sometimes they have like a cool like intro that's like kind of like a music video, which is what the
Hmm.
Sonic SatAM kind of is. It
Yeah,
gives you a detailed like background of what they're doing and what the show's gonna be like.
yeah, exactly. Sorry for butting in, Barney. I just really wanted to say that. I'll take it, because yeah, the theme song we love. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he brought up a
Okay.
good point that time.
Oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say he brought up a really good point that time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's why he's the co-host. That's why he's the co-host. Thank you. Don't read too much into it. Okay. So yeah, now Darius. Imagine this. Picture this. Him.
Hmm.
You're in the studio. In the studio, like Cookie Jar Animation. I think that's what the production company was. It was. They give you the keys. They say, okay, here you go. Do whatever you want with Sonic SatAM. And AM, if you want to revise it, if you want to continue it, whatever, do whatever you want with it. And if you had that power, uh, to you to use Sonic SatAM, however you see fit, if you want to revise it, if you want to bring it back, if you want to continue it, if you want to reboot it, right? What would you do if you had the power to control anything about Sonic SatAM?
Well, first off, I'm taking control of that production and I'm putting those episodes in order because
Yep.
that just makes me mad right off the bat. I'm like, why is this out of order? That's number one.
Hmm.
And number two, we're gonna continue it. We're gonna get season three, and I am introducing Knuckles
Yes.
because
Yes.
an iconic Sonic character. I mean, that's the big three. It's Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and you didn't have Knuckles in the show, so I would definitely put him
Hmm.
in at season three. And you know what? I'll bring in the other echidnas because something that kind of got me in the show was you kind of see other freedom fighters, but they're not really highlighted or introduced that way, or they don't really
Yeah.
last that long. So I was like, you know what? Let's introduce them because they're gonna need some backup for whatever monster that appeared with Snively at the end of the finale.
Hmm.
They're gonna need some backup. They're gonna need a heavy hitter, and we're bringing in the echidnas and my boy Knuckles.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's the thing. And I mean, season three. If they did do a season three, there is definitely a lot of potential you could have with that. And I'll even go one further and say that if the show was canonical in the Sonic
Yeah.
it would tie so greatly because it would explain a lot. It would explain why Tails is so connected to Sonic, and why
Hmm.
he's such a tech genius and all that because he learned all this stuff from Rotor and Sally and all that and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it would explain. Yeah, it would explain why Robotnik is always seeking revenge for Sonic because he pretty much destroyed his dystopic world at the end of the show. Um,
Yeah. Well, in his eyes, that was his utopia, which like, oh, good God, like that was horrible.
yeah. There's just so much you can have with that, and so much with the characters as well. Oh, I mean, you mentioned Antoine and Bunny being in a relationship, and ship. Didn't exactly show that in the show. Didn't show that in the first two seasons. But if it happens in season three or happens anywhere else, then yeah, that's great. And
Exactly. Because I think that would have been great because, when you watch the show, Bunny is like this, kick ass, you know, take no take no shit from anybody pretty much. She's the tough girl.
yeah,
Antoine was the coward. That would have been perfect. And then like, how I would have had it finally commence because maybe Bunny's always been interested, but he's never been brave enough to say something. Maybe there's like a situation where he has to save her, and then he finally like no thinking, he just does it. He saves her, big heroic moment, and he's no longer
hmm
a coward. That solves two birds, one stone.
yeah. And then of course we have the other characters like Rotor and Dulcie, for example.
Yes. So Dulcie's another one who she got done kind of dirty, which by the way, voiced by Cree Summer. Love her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like oh, true queen. And I like the when they introduced Dulcie because I'm like, once again, that goes back to the conversation about they brought in like other elements, not just sci-fi. This is like, hey, we're bringing dragons and like magic and whatnot. And they mentioned like, hey, she might be the last of her kind or extinct or whatever. But there's an episode where they kind of see like new dragons, but
hmm
that's the only time you see them. That's it. And it's like, why not just keep that trend going? Where we find the new dragons. Maybe they can be with the echidnas because
hmm
maybe the echidnas lived in like a sky island or whatever. It's like that's where they took the dragons. Something like that. That would have been great for her and like a story arc for her. She grows up and she meets these other dragons. She's like, hey, I am a freedom fighter to the end, but I'm gonna go live with my own kind and learn about myself and my past. That would
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah. And then of course we have Sonic and Sally. You mentioned Sonic and Sally.
Yeah, like so it never okay, you can call me corny, whatever. But if I had to do it, the last episode after, all the villains are defeated, everybody's living happily ever after. Not quite yet. Sonic and Sally need to get married. I would have done it.
Yeah,
Or at
one of the
least like they can run off on an adventure and find other people to help,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and they can leave Tails and Bunny in charge and Rotor and all them.
Yeah. One of the other good things that I think is a selling point in this show is the relationship between Sonic and Sally. Because in a lot of shows they have the shows when they have like a strong female character and a strong male character. There's always this like push and pull of like, oh, they start to develop feelings for each other, but they won't admit it. That if they are, how will they or won't they? But then
Yeah.
what I like about this show is that they fully realize that they have feelings for each other and are embracing it.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that also, that's relatable. Because, well, yeah, there are people who beat around the bush, but let's be real. Like, life is too short. If you got feelings for that person, you need to say something.
Like they
Because,
hold hands and they kiss each other and they kiss each other for a few
exactly,
episodes.
exactly. And it's like, you need to see that because, you show them actually being a couple and going through what a couple would probably go through. Because, we don't see that. Like, what if they're both out there on the front lines? Like, how do they feel? Like, and obviously Sally worries for Sonic a lot. Like there's a lot where he runs off just not thinking. He just going in head first, and Sally's like, "Hold on, we need a plan. I'm worried about you. You need to think about other people and how it's going to affect them." Because you could tell she genuinely cares, and that's what real love is. Because who would want to see like their spouse or whoever just run off without thinking and get hurt?
And Sonic genuinely cares for Sally as well, and
Mm-hmm.
that's proof. And going back to the episode you pitched, I'll take one even further. Sonic's nightmare. That
Yes.
one, Yeah, that one really not only shows how much Sonic cares for Sally, that his worst fear is her getting roboticized. But
Hmm.
yeah, you can see in that episode like genuine fear in Sonic because she's worried about Sally, and I don't think that's ever been present in any like Sonic iteration I've seen so far.
Exactly, because they never shown him being like a coward or that afraid of anything. And it's like, no, Sonic has that's a genuine thing. Like there's something that we're all gonna be afraid of. And now it's like, all right, here's the love of your life. What are you gonna do to beat them? Now you have to go through almost everything you're afraid of. Cause like wasn't it
Exactly.
also like the episode where we find out he's afraid of water too?
Um, I think, yeah, it was, yeah, I think it was more like the Mega Muck he was kind of afraid of.
Yeah, like something like that.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, that was like a real like tender thing, and this is what that's what I was gonna touch on. Again, I have no shade against Amy Rose. I love her. I love the character of the character. We stand Amy Rose here. She's a character on our show. She's a character on Adventures of the Trio. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. She's a character on Adventures of the Trio on your YouTube. YouTube. So yeah, obviously we love Amy Rose. However, I just don't think it's fair um, to have that character be solely created to be the love interest of Sonic. That's a legitimate thing. The only reason that Amy Rose was created to be a love interest of Sonic.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't
Like
think. Oh
that's
yeah, go
kind of
ahead.
like, backwards. That's kind of like backwards thinking. Cause like that's all she's there for. It's like, huh, okay.
Exactly, and I don't think that's fair for that character. Now I will say one of the things that I like, things that I like like that the world of Sonic is doing nowadays is that they're giving Amy, like her own like character arcs, like they're making her like her own fleshed out character.
Yes. And she definitely needs that because, eventually people are going to start asking, like, hey, why is she there? What's her purpose? What's her story? All that stuff. So give her stuff like that.
Exactly. And the fact that they're doing that, and that, in my opinion, again, if this was connected, that would be the perfect opportunity for Sally to come back as a character. I'm not saying she should come back solely to be Sonic's love interest. I'm saying that both those characters are like that like have so much potential that it'd be a waste to, have one over the other.
Exactly. And then I think there is a Sonic SatAM comic book. I need
Mm-hmm.
to double check to see if Amy is in there. Because I know Sally and all the other characters are, but I think Amy might be in there. I need to look to see.
I believe she is. We looked into like all the like lore surrounding this show on this
Yeah.
show. There are a few comics where it is like as like Amy is in there and Sally as well.
See, love triangle angle right there. Boom. Another angle you can do.
Sure, but both those characters have a lot of personality. That I like the fact that Amy is her own person now and not so tied to Sonic. Sonic that you bring in Sally. There's like the perfect love interest right there. That's right there. And again, still a character in her own right. So yeah. Again, the Sonic and Sally thing, I think is definitely would be a great thing if this show were to continue.
Yeah, like I definitely agree. Like I would love to see them continue on. And you know what? Even if like let's say they love each other but they don't want to get married or whatever because Sally wants to rule the kingdom, maybe Sonic wants to go on adventures. I would even be okay with that ending where we leave her like ruling the kingdom and he goes off to save other people or do other adventures to see what else he can get into, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's just the thing. That's just the thing. Like watching the last episode. Yeah, you can see there are so much. There's so much potential in and so much potential it can tie into the Sonic lore.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, yes. So anyway, that is Sonic SatAM again, and no, and like it's proof positive that we love the show. The show we think it's great. And Sonic the Hedgehog is amazing. All the characters are great. And, Tails, of course, is amazing. And we all need a Tails in life. We all need a Tails in life.
Yeah, we do, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll say it. It's SpongeBob and Spumballoon. Even though you're annoying, I do consider you guys the tails to my Sonic. I'm gonna start crying. That was beautiful. That, if we went virtual, I would hug you, man. And that was beautiful. Ah, I love you so much. I love you guys so much. Keep it together, Barney. Well, anyway, that's the anyway, that's the episode. Episode about Darius. An absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure to talk with you about this. I just thank you for kicking off our podcast with a bang.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I love talking Sonic SatAM with you guys. Can't wait to talk more cartoons with y'all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we get out of here, do you have anything to plug? Where can people find you? All that.
Oh well, like you said earlier, you can find me on YouTube at Darius Carlisle Official, and you can find me on TikTok, Darius Carlisle, Instagram, Darius Carlisle, and even Facebook. You can find me at Darius Carlisle Fitness, and Twitter, it's Darius Carlisle 100.
All right, all righty. So yeah, again, that is Darius Carlisle, Darius and of course, as you can find this podcast, as you know, it'll be on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the pod, do all the things that people do with podcasts, like, comment, subscribe, rate. We're gonna get a handle on this. We're gonna get a handle on this, boys, as we're gonna figure out how this works. And of course, as you're listening on our YouTube, go on to the YouTube channel to find Adventures of the Trio and all of our other shows out there. And do you want to talk obscure shows? And, and of course, as you know, keep loving cartoons and all that. On that, if you guys like this pod, we're gonna keep doing it because we love talking about cartoons.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So with that, we will wrap things up. I am Barney the Dinosaur. To our guest, there is Carlisle, co-host SpongeBob on Balloon. Wishing you good night, and always put your toys away when we're done with them. We will see you next time.